Have you ever dreamed of building the career in life you truly want, but felt unsure where to start? The Career Capital Collective podcast with Sarah Robson and Kayleigh Gaspari is your blueprint for success, offering actionable advice on navigating career pivot. Join us in redefining success on your own terms. Hello, and welcome back to the Career Capital Collective podcast. I'm your host, Kayleigh Gaspari, and today I am joined by a dear friend, Confidence. Hello.
Hi.
So a little bit about my friend Confidence. He's an entrepreneur, he's an AI business leader, and now he is a product leader at a company called Freeletics, which is in the fitness and technology space. He is also recognized as a Forbes top 30 under 30. So we are so pleased to have you here today, Confidence, and I'm so excited to catch up with you.
Thanks, Kayleigh. I'm looking forward to the conversation. I'm really excited. It's my first podcast, by the way, so this is fun.
Confidence and I met during our MBAs in Barcelona. And right off the bat, I remember seeing you on the streets of Barcelona. And I was so inspired by how fun you were, how successful, how driven. And I'm just so excited to have you here just as a friend, but also as someone I think folks can relate to and learn a lot from. So welcome.
Likewise. Thank you. That feeling is very mutual. Yeah, so I'm glad that we're getting to do this.
So Confidence, what's a little bit around what we're going to talk about today? I know we're going to define essentially how you've changed your career through AI, et cetera, and how you've defined success on your own terms.
I think just generally speaking, like what success means to me today and how that definition has evolved over time, like over the course of my career. I mean, I still feel like I'm very much at the onset of my career, but it's actually been 10 years now since we've been doing this. So a lot of time has passed. And so what does success mean now versus what it meant before? And also like, what does it mean to build your quote unquote like dream job? And what are some obstacles on the way? And from my own perspective, from my journey.
Yes, I love that. And I think what's really interesting or something I admire very much about you, Confidence, is when we had met in Barcelona, you were doing your MBA at Kellogg.
Yes, in Chicago, Northwestern, yeah.
Northwestern, right. And so you were on exchange in Barcelona at Asada,
Yes.
which was my school.
Yeah.
And I was really impressed by your background because you had a company that you had started, and then you had moved into AI at one point. And then after that, he had gone to Munich and found kind of a dream job at Freeletics, which is a fitness tech company. We'll get into that. But he essentially created the job from scratch. Like there was no job posting for this particular opportunity, and then ended up moving from San Francisco to Munich. Can you tell us a little bit around just essentially what Freeletics is and what you do there, and then we'll go into the whole story of how you created that dream job.
Yeah. So actually there was a job posting for a different job, even though I ended up with a job that actually didn't exist, like you said. So like you said, like right after business school, I went to work in enterprise AI. So startup, quote unquote, but very corporate, very heavy in the AI space, very tech oriented, very different from what I do now. So in B2B versus in consumer products.
Okay.
And how this sort of came about was, so after business school, we had sunset Liquid Confidence. It had been a journey up until that point, to be honest. I never really considered, although looking back, I would consider myself an entrepreneur. I never really considered myself an entrepreneur leading up to that point. But, one thing led to another, and Liquid Confidence happened. And then we ended up sunsetting the business and not hyperscaling past that. Okay. And then I wanted to go back to tech. So I went back to work in AI at C3 AI, which was actually a really fun experience. I mean, I learned a lot in that. It was just like shy of a year that I was there. So like a really, really short time. But I learned so much. And this was like my first kind of like exposure to new AI use cases, both on the enterprise front for business to business, but also like for consumers as well. And sorry, go ahead.
So before you move into this next space, for our listeners, what is enterprise AI? People throw around AI all the time.
It's kind of use cases for AI that help like big enterprises. So like integrating AI at different spots in your value chain as an organization. So if you think about supply chain optimization or predictive analytics across various like market segments. So like healthcare, for example. So supply chain in that front, or in manufacturing and equipment like semiconductor manufacturing, or even like Starbucks, for example, which was like a customer of mine at the time, predictive analytics or predictive maintenance for like the machinery. So these kind of things. Yeah.
Got it. Very cool. So you were the entrepreneur. Liquid Confidence was your drink, right? Like your
It
core.
was, yeah, which is such a ridiculous name now in hindsight that I think about it. It's a little bit like self-indulging.
So entrepreneur, and you were essentially in CPG. Like, what was the idea behind Liquid Confidence? And then he
Yeah,
moved to AI, and then he moved to product. So a little bit on each stage. What was Liquid
yeah.
Confidence all about?
So we called it, it was party without compromise is what the sort of like mantra evolved into. It started with stay fit, get lit, which was very millennial of us. But essentially, when I lived in the Bay, I worked in tech. So I worked in semiconductors. I was a product marketing engineer and then I became a business lead. But I always moonlighted as a personal trainer. So fitness is like a huge part of who I am. But also, you know me, Kayleigh, I love a good party. And my
Yeah.
whole thought process was basically how, if you're going to be drinking anyway, how can you drink a little bit more mindfully? And how can you be like conscious about this? So we're very cautious not to say it was a health drink, but it was a healthier alternative if you were going to be drinking anyway. And so we essentially created the kombucha cocktail market segment, if you may, which was a really big deal. I didn't realize it at the time, right? Because yeah, I had no context of like CPG prior or alcohol, the business of alcohol or like distribution or any of these things. I just, while living in the Bay, wanted to like drink something that was sort of replenishing my electrolytes, if you may, like rehydrating. This is a little bit pseudoscience, but like rehydrating while I was drinking alcohol. And I love kombucha. I love whiskey, and I started like mixing it together. And I was that really annoying fitness guy in the Bay who would show up to parties with like my own pre-mixed cocktails because I wanted it to be a little bit better for me. And so my friends kind of started nicknaming it Liquid Confidence. And when COVID happened, I had already decided to go to business school at this point. So I had quit my job. I had been at TI at that time for like 4 or 5 years, maybe. So I quit my job. I meant to travel. Obviously, COVID happened and I couldn't do that. And I thought, what better use of my time than to kind of write a business plan about like what this could be hypothetically. Mind you, I had no idea of like, I didn't even know what CPG meant at the time, which is like really, really funny. But I had no kind of like business know-how about that space, but I kind of just knew the problem that I wanted to solve and the value add that I wanted to create in that space. So I wrote this idea for Liquid Confidence. I went to business school. And then I met my co-founder, Ashley Sherman, who ended up becoming CEO of the company, one of the most competent people I've ever like met. And she was the one who actually understood how to like bring this to market, how to like do a pilot run. We met the rest of our co-founders through the MBA program as well. But that was essentially it. So we were trying to create a drink that was tasty. So there was a lot of like peak for White Claw at the time. I don't live in the US anymore, but I wonder if this is still very popular. And a little
Less.
bit of, yeah, the business behind it. So High Noon was taking a lot of share from White Claw at the time. And to compare them together, High Noon is a cocktail version of it, right? Because it's real vodka mixed with water, seltzer water, versus White Claw, which is essentially just like double like fermented. And so the cocktail allowed it to have a better taste profile. And so I wanted to do that in the kombucha space because hard kombucha existed, but kombucha cocktails didn't exist. And so I talked to Ashley Sherman about this and we thought, well, neither of us know how to make kombucha for starters. So we should probably find someone to kind of like make this a reality. And so we put out a Slack post and then we found our other co-founder, Kat, who had worked in food science prior to business school for many, many years, actually. So she was pretty experienced, knew how to make kombucha. And we created the first MVP, if you may, if you want to use the very tech term in the CPG space. And we started with parties. So we would run like tasting parties, invite our friends, have them give like feedback. And one thing led to another. And, you know, we started talking to on premise like sites, so like bars in Evanston, and as well as some retailers. To be honest, I never really thought much about it. It wasn't like I went in thinking I want to build like a massive business. It was kind of just like I'm having fun. I'm kind of learning as it goes, like what it means to be an entrepreneur and start a business. And one thing led to another, and then we started Liquid Confidence. We actually got it like in retail towards the end, right? So we were like in 25 stores by the end of it across like the Chicagoland. How I built this with Guy Raz, who is like a legendary interviewer and kind of in the entrepreneurial space. I was on LinkedIn one day and I saw that he Clubhouse. So there was like a platform called Clubhouse, which was like all the rage back in the day, a few years ago. And he was on there with a few like VC friends, and they were like, "Hey, if you're a founder, just come on and like pitch." And so like I went on this platform, and I talked about like how we were creating this new category in alcohol, kind of like using the White Claw versus High Noon as the blueprint of like what we were trying to achieve in kombucha cocktails. And I got so much attention from it. Like I got a lot of people like reach out after that pitch, and that was kind of how we started building momentum. And then we started like participating in pitch competitions and use that kind of an avenue to make a little bit of money to like launch our pilot run. And we were actually like, we were at least breaking even, right? So we were not losing money because at the time we started, go ahead.
Actually quite impressive for like startups in food.
Yeah. Especially like, where like at the spot that we were in, right? Because we were incubating through Kellogg, right?
Right.
As well as 1871, which is like an incubator type startup foundry thingy in Chicago. And it happened really organically. And one thing led to another. We got introduced to like more retailers and we got placements, but we were doing all the things, right? We were our own distributor. We were our own like salespeople. It was a really fun experience. And I learned a lot from there. And I really think that it changed my life and it changed the course of my career.
That's amazing. So, like, why did you decide to leave Liquid Confidence? You had all this momentum. Like, what pushed you into your next role?
Yeah. I think at the end of the day, because we went in, or because I particularly went in, kind of, it just sort of happened. I was not very intentional about it, if I'm being really honest. After the honeymoon phase was over, right, we were like a real product on the shelves, like at bars and things like this, in like multiple retail and on-premise locations. The honeymoon phase was over, and it was very much an alcohol business. And I realized that I was not passionate about alcohol. I went in because I was passionate about health and wellness, but also like
Right.
partying and kind of finding like a happy medium there. And at the end of the day, when it became just purely an alcohol business, or it started to feel like it, the passion was lost, which I think is it's a very important thing to have if you're going to be an entrepreneur, like that passion for the product or like the value that you're creating. And so that was one aspect of it. And other things like our unit economics honestly didn't make the most sense to scale. And we were just not prepared for what it meant to run a CPG company. We could have been, right? And we got a lot of like investor interest and like things like this. But me and my co-founders, especially me and Ashley, I remember like we were talking to our mentor from Hyde Park Angels, which is like a conglomerate of like investors, angel investors in Chicago. And he was telling us of all these things that needed to happen, the steps. And we looked at each other and we were like, I mean, I barely know what a 401k is. I don't want to be responsible for other people's 401ks. And I'm kind of joking when I say that, but I think this was like it was a very pivotal moment when we decided, hey, I don't think that this is the right time for us to scale this exact kind of business. From my side, it was mainly about the lack of passion, and I wanted to go back to tech, and I wanted to go into health and wellness, which has been like health and wellness tech, which has been like my dream for as long as I can remember, like my career North Star.
Beautiful. Let's pivot into that because I'm excited. First of all, you're so interesting, and I didn't even know that about Liquid Confidence. I just kind of figured it was like a small scale thing, but it's a pretty big deal. You obviously are very passionate about health and wellness. So tell me, like, where did that come from? You know, you're a spin instructor. I see you not only being an executive, but also being a spin instructor. Where did your passion for health and wellness come from?
Yeah, it really came later in life. It came in college, actually. So up until college, I was like a very lazy kid. Like I didn't play sports or anything like this in high school. In fact, I was really bad at sports, which was very embarrassing. And I was a little bit overweight. And I was an engineering student, right? So I was an electrical engineer in university. And it was a pretty intense coursework, if I'm being honest, right? So I was like struggling a little bit. Plus, I was like very not comfortable with my weight. For someone whose name is Confidence, I'm a very shy person naturally. But then I think also not being very confident in like how I looked and like my body and things like this really took a toll on how I presented and like who I was. And it came from a YouTube video. It was like the early days of like YouTubers. I forget who the YouTuber was. And I watched this video about this guy doing a transformation. And he changed his life basically by like the way he ate and started working out. And I remember I was doing a summer school kind of program to get ahead during my undergrad. And I was like, you know what, this summer, I'm going to become hot. I remember like thinking this to myself. And I like started just like eating healthy, and I have a very like obsessive personality, so I started like geeking out about the science about it. I read almost every article you could about like nutrition and like finding the best diet and like how to balance your diet and like etc. And I started geeking out about this stuff, and then I started working out as well, and I noticed like my body started changing, and very interestingly, I became better at school at the time, and I think I just became more confident, no pun intended. And it really just it really changed my life. And at that time, so I studied electrical engineering, so I really focused on systems, electrical systems, if you may. And this was kind of at the early onset of, or in my opinion, early onset of like wearables. I remember Fitbit was the first one that I bought, and I was so interested in the idea of kind of like measuring your progress as you went along with like your fitness journey or like in your transformation journey. And I became obsessed. I was like, I need to make this like my life and career. And obviously, I didn't do that immediately after undergrad. I went to work in semiconductors. But even when I was a product marketing engineer for a few years, I always favored or like looked for projects that were around like health and wellness or like healthcare. And actually, Fitbit actually ended up being one of my customers at some point. So I would spend all this time at their office socializing and kind of like networking because I was just really obsessed with that space. And that's kind of like how it came to be. But it was this idea of like changing my body and the way that I felt, the way that I looked, more of on the joke side, but really the way that I felt and how this like affected other areas of my life really positively. And then, you know, true to like my obsessive personality, deciding that I was going to be that guy who was going to like make this like my career, essentially.
That's so interesting because when I first met you, I was like, wow, this guy is one of the most fit people I've ever seen in my entire life. Like the 8-pack and the whole works. And I think it was just something that you always had, but it sounds like it was a bit of a like something you worked on. It was a process, like it didn't just happen.
Yeah,
So
not at all natural. Yeah.
and then so finding Freeletics, like tell us a little bit about like what Freeletics is. I know you've been working on the product side on the AI coach, but like what is the company? What do they do? And how did you decide you were like, hey, I need to go work here?
Right. So Freeletics is an AI powered fitness coaching platform. We've been on the market for a couple of years now, I think about 12 years. And one of the biggest, Europe's most successful fitness tech startup, we love to say. I actually applied to Freeletics for the first time, like back in 2017, I think it was. So a very long time ago. So I had known of the product. This was kind of like at the onset of like my fitness journey. I had used a bunch of like, or tried to use a bunch of apps to like train. When I was a personal trainer, I actually recommended the God workouts they had at the time to some of my clients when we were not meeting one-on-one. So I was pretty familiar with the brand and the product. I just thought it seemed really interesting. I didn't get the job at the time, which is kind of funny now looking back in hindsight. And I did other things with my career. I stayed in heavy tech, in semiconductors.
Right.
But after business school, I went to work at this AI company that I talked about before, which was like really fun, but I was at a different space in my career.
Like,
Yeah. So I went to go work at C3 AI, which is an enterprise AI company in the Bay Area. It was very heavy, right? A lot of like ex-McKinsey consultants, these sort of like people. I felt really honestly pretty privileged to have gotten that job. It was a senior director role in the strategy go-to-market, so like sales and GTM. And I really liked the end product, and I learned so much about AI, a shit ton in that like very short time frame that I was there. But cultural wise, it was not the right fit for me. And I think on top of that, since at this point it had been many years that I really wanted to make health and fitness tech kind of like my career essentially, and I was not getting that there. And so I randomly saw on LinkedIn once that they were hiring for a role that I ended up not existing, that I didn't get. But I cold reached out to one of the leaders on the team and kind of like told him why I would be a perfect fit for this, right? I have a hardware engineering background and I love health and wellness. And these are the other things that I've done in my career. I've been a failed founder, which is kind of like a prize, I would say, in the startup world. And that's how I got in the interview process, right?
okay.
So, and one thing led to another, and the product role sort of like came about while I was in the interview process, and I ended up leading product there, which I
Okay,
still
so
do, by the way. Yeah.
you make it sound like it's so easy, by the way. I'm like, let's circle back on this because I think this is one of the things that a lot of folks struggle with, especially people who are up and coming in their career. Like, hey, I have this passion for this thing,
Hmm.
but I feel like I kind of need to do the corporate thing or the consulting thing, or like, how did you make the decision that you're like, you know what, I'm just going to go in, I'm going to cold call someone? How do you even do that process? Like, did you just reach out on LinkedIn or?
I did. But I think prior to that, the process of like having a startup or at least trying to have one gave me a lot of self confidence, even like through the failure and having to sunset the business, even without hyperscaling.
Right,
But I had come to this idea that I might not know a lot, but I was very confident in my ability to figure it out. I think this is what a lot of entrepreneurs learn.
right.
So I was really convinced, like very recklessly optimistic that I could be capable even if I wasn't at the moment. And so that
Right.
was the number one thing, confidence. I think also prior to that, I was very lucky earlier on in my career. I did do the corporate thing heavy, and it worked out for me. I got promoted early on and things like this, right? So I had some experience under my belt, like working in the corporate space as an individual contributor, as a people manager as well, right? So I felt or I knew that I had something to offer. This is me trying to like be modest again, but I was aware that I had something to offer. I think yeah, I think most importantly was that I was so passionate, or I am so passionate about this space market segment that regardless of what I didn't know, I was confident in my ability to figure out just because I had that much passion. So yeah, I just cold emailed or cold LinkedIn messaged this guy, and I think it worked. And yeah, that's how I got in the interview process. Yeah.
So we're going to talk more about Freeletics because I'm just astounded with how amazing it is to not only just have the confidence or the, the optimism to say like, hey, I'm going to reach out to this person, cold call them, like, what's the worst that could happen? But then not only do that, but get the job, move from California to Munich in a new city, like complete massive change. And what I love about it is you just went for it. You just did it. And I think for people
Yeah.
looking on the outside, they think like, oh my gosh, that's a big scary thing. Like even if you get past the cold calling phase, like what happened next? What was the interview process like? And how are you like, hey, I'm the perfect guy for product?
Yeah. It was a very long interview process, right? So I don't know that I went in thinking I'm the perfect guy for product. It was actually more of a general management role that I applied to, which I actually think leans a little bit better to like my skill set, just for my prior experience, but story for another day. It was a very long interview process. After a few rounds, I had come to Munich. I met with the team. I really liked them, to be honest. And I think more than anything, like with the CEO, for example, who's like my current boss, great guy. And it was the first time I've had a lot of cool bosses in the past, right? Olympic
Right.
gold medalist or Olympic medalist, ex
Wow.
McKinsey consultants, blah, blah, blah. But I had never really worked for someone who I thought, hey, if I ended up like you in the future, like I would be fine, right? And I think at that stage of my career, that's something that I was really looking forward to. So more than anything, it felt like a culture that I would be happy to be a part of, especially like as an outsider looking in. That was
Right.
really my thought process going in. And I think just generally speaking, we vibed just with the team and the opportunity. And yeah, I think luck played a huge factor. I would be remiss to not call that out. But I think I was also prepared for the opportunity, right? All of the things that I talked about before, like having all these other experiences, trying a bunch of like different things. I was able to communicate that through the
Right.
interview process. Yeah.
So during the interview process, like what were some of the things that made you like stand out versus other candidates? Like because you were essentially, I would say not like a risk, but you were moving from another country. Like I think there's more involved to that than just choosing someone
Mm-hmm.
who was already in Munich.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. To be honest, I mean, I don't know, right? Because I was not on the panel, right? So I can only talk about it from my perspective. But I think maybe the passion really showed. I
Yeah.
had worked in tech at that point for a number of years. Again, as I said, like individual contributor, people manager, right? So I had some experience. But I think more than anything, and maybe what could have been a differentiator was I really love health and fitness. Like, this is what I do in my free time. Like, I'm reading every article. I'm literally reading like scientific papers, like peer reviewed studies, just because I love that space. And I think that came through maybe. in the way that I interviewed and I interacted with them. I think there
Right.
was also a lot of passionate people about the same area that I was interviewing with, which meant like we had something in common more than, because at the end of the day, it's still just a job. It's still just a tech company, and we're still just
Right.
making products or features. The passion can be a real differentiator, right? Passion is really, it's really a motivator, or at least it can be. And I think this was what was true for my case.
Yeah. It's like not just saying it, it's actually embodying it. Like I feel, or at least looking from the outside, like everything that you do, even in like it looks like your personal life is related to that passion and
Totally.
fitness.
Yeah. Yeah.
You're a spin instructor now as well.
I am. Yes, I do this on the side. I've always personal trained. I think like over regardless of what I've done, like when I was in the Bay, I taught at Barry's Boot Camp a little bit. I worked at LA Fitness for a little bit. Like it's something that I love. It's a different side of my brain. It's very in contrast to like how I am in the professional world, quote unquote. And I think honestly, if capitalism didn't matter, I would probably just like live at a gym. In true honesty. Yeah.
And I guess, like, what is your kind of role today? Can you tell us a little bit more about like the AI coach and that product, and like what's your kind of vision for the next step for you?
Yeah. So my role at I lead product. I lead product in UX. I'm the VP of product is my official title. So I have product managers on my team and user experience folks from designers and
Very cool.
researchers, etc. The AI coach, at least what we're aiming for moving forward. And since I joined, the big thing that we've been working on is improving the infrastructure for the AI coach to allow us build new and better features that fit kind of evolving user demands, right?
Huh.
So things like better personalization,
Mm.
external data integration, like so think like wearables, kind of creating a 360 view of your fitness in one platform. But also mixed modality, if you may. So like allowing same training program directly correlate from like one type of equipment to another kind of equipment, better capability estimation, right? So if you can do a bench press, how does that translate to a push up? This kind of thing in a one-to-one setting. Yeah, so this is what we've been working on, and this is kind of in terms of like product development, this is what we're really focused on moving forward.
Okay, cool. And do you see yourself like staying in Germany for the foreseeable future? Like, tell me a little bit about what it's like being an American moving to a different company in a new
Yeah.
country.
It's very different. I mean, I'm lucky that I work at a very international company, or it feels very international, right? So it doesn't feel so different. I work solely in English. Otherwise, I think that's the only way I could have survived living here. But I grew up as an expat kid, right? So my parents were expats growing up. I'm Nigerian. I moved to the US. I grew up in Asia in high school. So I've had a very
Okay.
international background. So it wasn't so strange to me. In fact, I think I craved that lifestyle
Right.
growing up. So when the opportunity presented itself, it was more than happy to jump on it. But living in Europe has been interesting. I think the work culture is very different.
Right.
You know, it's true that like prior to this, I worked in more corporate settings, except for obviously at Liquid Confidence, but I worked in more corporate settings. And now I work at a startup, so that also like plays a factor. But little things like vacation days, like where there's so many vacation days, right? So I feel that my mental health is a lot better, my work-life
Right.
balance, if you may, is a lot better. And working in a space that I'm really passionate about, obviously, like plays a huge factor. But also like understanding like different like cultural dynamics. I think one of the first person on my team that quit. I don't know if you should like leave this part in, but I'll just say it anyway.
Sure.
In my first exit interview, right, as a people leader, he said to me, he was like, "Hey, this is not the U.S., right? You need to like chill out." And I realized that I'm not going to say his name, but he literally said this to me in his exit, or at least our last conversation. And I think the work culture is a little different. I'm not gonna lie, like versus like Silicon Valley. Yeah, I mean, my experience is very clouded, right? Because it's a very particular environment that I came from, but it's different. It's a lot more balanced, I would say. Yeah.
That's like a real thing because when I was working in Germany, which is, part of our crossover story,
Yeah.
I also got the same feedback. Like, hey, people are on vacation during the summer. You need to relax. And I was like, well, I
Yeah.
gotta get things done. Like it came off, I guess, a little bit self-serving or
Yeah.
like
Totally,
and so I
totally.
think it's like worth knowing that, maybe like, what's your advice for someone who's thinking about working and like living in a different culture in a different country?
Yeah, I think open-minded to adopt sort of like the environment or like the way of working or like the way of being in the environment that you're in, and not superimpose like who you are or like where you come from in like this new environment. I think just being generally open-minded and being conscientious of like the environment that you're in and like the people that you're working with. Other than that, I think especially like in our day and age, right, like globalization is definitely very much a thing, right? So it's not, I imagine, as huge of a difference like when my dad moved from like, I don't know, Nigeria to like Malaysia or Singapore or something like that. But it's a lot more similar now. But at the end of the day, it's just like being conscious and respectful of the environment that you come into. I think this would be the biggest thing.
Yeah, that's really good advice.
Yeah.
I think it's really easy to just take what's comfortable and normal, quote unquote, from, what you're used to and try to think like, oh, well, it worked there, it's going to work here. And having that humility, I suppose, to be like, okay, what can I actually learn about how
Yeah.
things work here will make you much more successful.
Exactly.
So,
Humility. I love that word. That's the perfect word for that. Yeah. It's the humility to accept new ways of working or being in the new environment.
and the other thing I wanted to talk about that you mentioned was, so you went from corporate to startup, which are
Mm-hmm.
very different environments, as we've learned. How are you balancing now your life being kind of in that crazy startup world, but also having this passion for like wellness and health and fitness?
Yeah. Balance is a good phrase that I love to say or bring up this point about like work-life harmony. I stole this from like one of my favorite executives. I think her name is like Dara Treseder. She was like the old CMO of Peloton. And she always talked about like work-life harmony and how this like really should be a thing, right? Because work-life balance or like balance in general can feel like a myth, right? Because there's going to
Right.
be seasons of like grind and seasons of like more chill out phases. If you think about like your career, like you experience like as a sine wave, there's like peaks and troughs.
An engineer.
But anyway, in the startup world, I mean, I'm lucky that I work in wellness, so I definitely prioritize things like my training and like my nutrition and like my sleep and things that like help my mental well-being kind of like stay on par so that I can
Right.
perform when need be at work. I think the other thing that's different between the corporate and startup environment, at least in my experience, was I was very lucky earlier on in my career and, things went okay. But I was always in the environment where like I was the youngest or I was the most different person or I was the only Black person. I was like that young Black guy, like in certain
Yeah.
environments. So I always felt this need to put on and I now at my current job, this is the first time where I honestly feel like I'm being myself like at work, right? I don't think anyone really cares
Yeah.
how I am unless that I accept that I'm delivering or like my team is delivering. And so I think this has really like played in a positive sense into how I show up at work now. But I think generally speaking, I prioritize wellness, like my wellness and understanding that wellness, right? So back to the topic about harmony,
Yeah.
definitely there's been times that have been more grind, like in
Yeah.
that season, and there's been a little bit more chill out times. So I'm not saying that every day or every week has to like match the other in terms of balance, but I don't know, if I put like my career or time on like a graph and I drew a line of best fit or something like this, right? Like the slope should be harmonious. This is kind of like what I'm talking about. So it's it's harmony over the course of like
Right.
an extended period of time. This is
Yeah.
what I'm striving for.
I'm visualizing this right now. We're gonna have
Yeah,
to do
totally.
like and I think that's a really interesting way of looking at it because balance sounds so cliche, right? We always talk about it, and it's like balance feels like a seesaw. Like you have to give something up for the other side to go the other way.
Yeah,
And harmony is
totally.
like more of a fit. Like how are
Absolutely.
you creating a different feeling and a different like
Yeah.
situation? So I think that's a beautiful way to look at it. I love that very
Yeah.
much. Um, and, as we talk about success and our podcast is all about people defining success on their own terms, what does success mean to you now? How are you defining that in this phase of life?
Yeah, I feel like I'm going to talk about harmony a lot because I heard this like a few years ago, and honestly, I think it changed my life and like how I viewed my career.
Beautiful.
Success to me is like finding this harmony, right? So being in an environment where I am doing work that I find impactful or I feel like I'm contributing positively to society. But at the same time, I have space for the things that I enjoy outside of work, like my training or like my nutrition or like singing. I love singing and these kind of things like I have, or traveling, right? I have passions outside of work. And so success to me is kind of creating that life, like, or getting to the point where I can like create that life, right? That I feel harmony over time. That's what success looks like to me. And I think that my definition of success has definitely changed a lot.
Right.
Like from the earlier on in my career, I come from a very Nigerian family. It was very much like you have to be a doctor, be an engineer. Like
Feel
money is
that.
something that we talk about all the time. Like success is like top of mind, right? So it's never something that I didn't think about as a kid. And I think success at that time meant to me like make a shit ton of money, get into like the best schools and like progress in your career, get promoted as fast as possible, and climb the career ladder. And in true honesty, I did do a lot of that, and I am still doing it. But I think my definition has evolved over time now to be I can spend time with like my family and friends. Like I might make a little less money, but I have more free time. I'm oversimplifying it here, but yeah, this is what success means to me now.
This is so interesting because I think a lot of folks who grew up either with like immigrant parents or grandparents,
Hmm.
like for me, my grandparents are Japanese. It was the same type of story. Like you need to be super successful. Like, how were you able to change that definition over time, like, and get to the point where you're like, hey, this is now a higher priority for me to have harmony and like I can do that?
Yeah, that's a good question. I don't know that I have such a straight answer as to like how I was able to change it. I think a lot of it happened organically. One of
Yeah.
my favorite memories from growing up was I was one of those. I think I'm naturally more artistic, even though I ended up studying engineering in school, which is kind of strange. And I remember like talking to like my dad in the car. My sister was there also, and I was telling him about like I want to do something that I'm passionate about. And my dad literally said to me, he was like, "You know what I'm passionate about? Going on vacation, being able to afford the mortgage." Honestly, like, I mean, I joke about it now, but like I don't know, I don't remember how old I was, like 7 or 8. It really stuck with me, and I was like, "Oh, okay, like you should do the things that you're supposed to do." And that for a very long time, like in college and like even like looking for a job after college, this was like emblematic of like what success should be or was. And I think as again, like going back to some luck that I've had in my career so far, as I started like achieving some of these things, I
Hmm.
realized that I didn't really like feel any different. In fact, I felt maybe emptier at some points. And I really had to prioritize allowing myself to have joy and to be happy. I mean, I know happiness is like fleeting. Generally speaking, prioritize what made me feel okay every day.
Yeah.
And that's kind of how I organically and over time started like having this idea of like a harmonious life, being successful. I mean, even on the topic of like harmony, part of it is like working in a job that you are behind like the vision, right? Or like you're like passionate about, or in an industry or market segment that you're really passionate about. That's one aspect of it, right? So it happened organically over time. It wasn't like one moment in time.
And I feel like it's okay for that kind of definition of success to change over time once you've done the things that you needed to do. Like you almost need to learn those feelings over time to be like, okay, what
Yeah,
is truly important to me? What do I like? What do I not like?
yeah,
And only through learning those things can you be like, hey, now I know what makes me feel good and how I want my life to look. And I think
exactly.
for a lot of young folks starting their career, they may be like, well, I'm doing the things that I need to do. Like, that's probably okay.
Hmm. Hmm.
Like, is it okay to learn? Like, it's a journey.
Yeah, it's going to be different for everyone, right? So I'm a big believer in learning from your own mistakes, even if they're not mistakes, like learning from your own experiences versus like being told. So I
Right.
100% agree with you. Yeah, totally.
And this has been such an interesting conversation. I could talk to you forever. What is some of the last pieces of advice that you would give to listeners who are just, starting their own career, defining what success means for them, maybe looking for something that's their passion?
Yeah, I think in general, that's a good question. Let me think about it for a second. I think in general, just to try stuff, like just do the thing, like, like do whatever like piques your interest at a certain point in time. I was listening to a podcast the other day, and there was this guy, I think his name was like Stephen Pressfield or something like this, who was talking about if something scares you, it's probably like the right thing to do at that time. I don't know that I fully agree 100%, but most of the time I kind of agree, right? So a lot of times people are scared to like do something because they think they're not capable or they don't know enough or they're not qualified or blah, blah, blah. And just try stuff, like for me, this was like trying a different role versus a role that I was more familiar with, moving from hardware to software or
Right.
moving from B2B to B2C or like moving countries, like whatever it is that
Yeah.
seems interesting at the moment, obviously within reason, but just like try stuff. And I think eventually, at least it was for me, you'll find the thing that sticks. And the thing that's kind of like at the intersection of you're being good at it and it brings you kind of like joy, right? So like it's good to you.
And just to wrap up, what's next for you?
I think doing a lot of the same. I do feel like generally speaking, I'm at an okay point in my life. I would say professionally, but at a much bigger scale, right? I still think that I'm very much at the onset of like my career or leadership journey. So like still in like the wellness tech space, impactful space. I don't know, dating, finding a partner, like settling down. I don't know. Yeah, harmony, exactly. Yeah.
Well, this was amazing. I'm so happy that you came on here and you have had such an interesting career journey. Like I think you embody exactly the type of, person and role model we love to have on our show because
thanks, Kayleigh.
It's not linear,
Yeah,
like life really, you can define what that means to you. And you've pivoted from entrepreneurship all the way to AI and now to product, from the software to the hardware, like new countries, new experiences. And thank you for joining us, Confidence.
Thanks so much, Kayleigh. Thanks for having me. This was really fun. This is, I don't really talk a lot about myself or like my career. So this was like really fun and like out of my comfort zone. So thanks for having me.
Good. If it scares you, go for it, right?
Yeah, exactly.
I love it. Thanks for tuning in to the Career Capital Collective podcast with Sarah Robson and Kayleigh Gaspari.
We hope you feel inspired and empowered to take charge of your career and build the life you truly want. Follow us on Instagram at Career Capital Collective.